I realized was everybody has a competitive edge just by being themselves. We're in a world where there are very big players in many spaces, right? So for instance, in e-commerce, there's Amazon. They seem unbeatable, but the small guy or gal can actually compete by being more of themselves.
You're an entrepreneur, and you make vital decisions that hopefully blossom into a business. You're the savvy, out-of-the-box risk taker who believes wholeheartedly in the process of innovation. Innovation that will change the world. This is CEO Chat with Gresham Harkless, and you're about to embark on a journey through the awesome world of business. Gresham is the epitome of drive and desire as he works to help support small businesses and entrepreneurship. And you're about to learn from this entrepreneur how you can improve your odds of success in the business world. Welcoming the host of CEO Chat, here's Gresham Harkless.
Hello. This is Gresham Harkless from CEO Chat, powered by CBNation.co and Blue 16 Media, your choice for all your website design, SEO, and digital marketing needs. And this was an awesome chat with Elaine Pofeldt. Elaine is an independent journalist who specializes in writing about careers and entrepreneurship, and the author of the new book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, where she looks at how entrepreneurs are scaling to $1 million in revenue prior to hiring employees. She writes about $1 million one-person businesses for Forbes.com, and formerly she was a senior editor at Fortune's Small Business magazine. We also had the great opportunity to feature the $1 Million One-Person Business on our CEO bookshelf. So during the chat, we spoke about her background, her book, and what led her to start her business, and some of the characteristics and traits that she noticed from some of the $1 million one-person businesses that she covered in her book. So this was an absolutely awesome chat. There's loads and loads of great content. So what I want you to do is sit back and enjoy this CEO chat with Elaine Pofeldt. All right, Elaine, are you still there with me?
I'm here, yes.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to kind of speak with us. One of the first things that I usually do is just give you the floor to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what has kind of led you to start your business.
That sounds great, Gresham. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great to be here. I am a journalist who specializes in entrepreneurship and careers, and I've been writing about one-person businesses and entrepreneurs in scalable businesses for a number of years. And what I've been working on lately is a new book, The $1 Million One-Person Business. It looks at how people in solo businesses and partnerships are getting to $1 million in revenue without hiring employees.
Awesome. Yeah, and that definitely seems like that's something that's kind of, just coming about, something that's fairly new, right? The idea of having a $1 million one-person business?
Yes, you're right, Gresham. It is fairly new. One of the things that I discovered in my reporting is that there are more than 35,000 non-employer firms. Those are the ones that have no employees other than the owners, that are bringing in $1 million to $2.49 million in annual revenue a year. That comes from U.S. Census data. And that number increased 33% since just 2011, from 2011 to 2015. And what is helping the trend to grow are new and low-cost technologies. There are many things that make it possible for a very small business to have a big reach today that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. When you think about it, mobile phones, for instance, and Wi-Fi connections that we have all over the place enable us to work from pretty much anywhere. There are all kinds of low-cost apps and tools that make it easy and inexpensive to run a business. And even things that used to be expensive, like having a server, have been replaced by cloud-based technology, so you don't have to come up with the money to buy a server for any sort of technology business or one that might need a server. It's so inexpensive to put up a website today. I don't know if you recall the days when it cost about $50,000 to put up a good business website, but I do. I worked on the internet starting in 1999, and it was very prohibitive. Now you can put one up for free in an afternoon. So all of these trends are coming together at one time. and contributing to the growth of $1 million one-person businesses and many high six-figure businesses as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's exactly what I was wondering about. Like, what was kind of the cause to, I guess, sparking all these one person, $1 million businesses. And it seems like, I guess, technology has definitely played a huge part. That's what you definitely saw when you were kind of researching and interviewing those entrepreneurs and business owners.
That definitely has played a role, but the individual owners have some choice in the matter too. So what I have found is that more people these days are questioning the corporate model of working. You're available 24/7 to a company because you're on salary. People really value their lifestyle. And I think this spans all generations. I talk to people who are in their 20s who have a passionate interest. It might be a sport, for instance, or their music, or just something that they love and they want to protect some time in their life for what they enjoy. Or maybe they'd like to travel and they want a location independent career. Then you see people who have families who would like to be available to their children at home during the day, but still need to work or want to work, who value their time too and don't want someone else to control it. And then there are people that are in the pre-retirement or retirement phase who want to work on their own terms so they can do other things that they enjoy in life. So I think you have people who have really great credentials in all sorts of fields who are saying, you know what, I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk and go into business for myself in order to have the lifestyle that I love. I don't necessarily need to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. I don't necessarily want to create a scalable business, but I want a good business that can sustain me, that can cover the costs that come with being self-employed, like healthcare, which can cost as much as a mortgage. I know I've paid it myself. And things like building a cash cushion in case clients pay you late. There are some costs to being in business for yourself. And people are saying, if I deploy those same skills I was putting into a career, I can cover those costs and more and live a much better life than I was living when I was working for someone else.
Interesting. So when I guess you interviewed the people in the book, you found that I guess a lot of them had like different reasons or different goals for maybe even starting a business. And maybe that $1 million mark was something that a lot of them hit, but it wasn't necessarily the reason why they started the business. Would that be correct to say?
That's definitely correct, Gresham. I think a lot of them went into business for themselves because they had a passion for what they were doing and wanted to share it with other people. It wasn't always a case of do what you love, the money will follow. Some of these folks had multiple passions, but they picked a passion that they were willing to monetize and turned it into a business.
Interesting. And yeah, I know that's always difficult with entrepreneurs and business owners. Sometimes you hear so many different things where, you know, do your passion and the revenue will follow. But you found like there's been two different kind of, I guess, groups or two different paths to kind of building a business like that.
Definitely. One example from the book that was very powerful for me was Willow and Everett. It's an internet store run on Amazon by Ben and Camille Arneberg. They're a young couple. And when they started the business, he had been in the military and she was working in corporate social sustainability and had a photography business on the side. And they wanted to do a business together. So they tried to look for a common interest that would bring them together around this business. And they both are very athletic. She's a certified personal trainer, and he was involved with jumping out of airplanes with a parachute in the military. So they had a lot in common and they liked running. And so they started selling running compression sleeves. It's an accessory that goes around your arm. And it didn't sell well when they put up a store. So they regrouped and they said, okay, well we love running and that's our passion, but people weren't buying that product. So what do we do next? And they thought about their other interests, and Camille has an interest in painting, but she does that for herself. It's just a personal passion. She doesn't want it to be a commercial interest. So then they thought, okay, well, we love home entertaining. We love having parties. And we love picking out all of the accessories for the parties, like, the decanters and glassware and things like that we will use when we're entertaining. So they created a store called Willow and Everett on Amazon, and they started testing out the products in small batches to see what people responded to. And then if people bought a particular product in larger quantities, they would redouble their efforts. And then maybe some of the products didn't take off, so they would discount them and just discontinue them. And that was a great way for them to sort of figure out where was this intersection between their passion and a business that could sustain them. And now the business is doing great. They've actually started a couple of other businesses. One of them is called CubeFit, and it sells a mat for people who use stand-up desks so that they don't get blood clots. It helps to encourage people to shift their weight so that they're not just standing completely stationary. And they raise money for that on Kickstarter. And then another interest sort of tied into their home entertaining is cold brew coffee. So they've actually just introduced their own cold brew coffee too. And they keep on experimenting with where their passion meets their desire to run a sustainable business. And I would recommend that approach to anybody, because sometimes there are things that you do that you love that you don't want to turn into a commercial interest. Like, for instance, I love Taekwondo. I take Taekwondo 3 times a week. I would not like to turn that into a commercial interest. I just love doing it. I do it with 2 of my daughters, and it's just a fun thing for me to do. I don't want to bring money into the equation for that. So I think there are passions that everyone has that they just don't want to connect with money, and that's fine. You just need to find one that you could sell and then you'd feel comfortable selling.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it sounds like, and definitely from a lot of the examples in the book, and this has definitely been an awesome book because you get to see like so many different ways and paths that people have taken to reach the $1 million mark, so to speak, $1 million one person business mark. And I think that's probably the most exciting thing about, getting and going through this book was that you can see that there's not one path and then there's so many different ways to do it, but it also is very kind of unique to some degree to each and every person, whatever their talents or skills or things that they're passionate about.
That's a really interesting observation, Gresham. I actually found the same way. I felt the same way in doing the research because I was just surprised by the wide variety of businesses that were getting to 1 million. So you had certain categories, but within those categories, the businesses were as individual as any one person business would be. And I thought that was just tremendously exciting because what I realized was everybody has a competitive edge just by being themselves. We're in a world where there are very big players in many spaces, right? So for instance, in e-commerce, there's Amazon. They seem unbeatable, but the small guy or gal can actually compete by being more of themselves because people also like to do business with a real person, a person that feels like someone they can talk to. So some of these businesses would build a community online around their interests and made themselves, the owners made themselves very accessible to their tribe, so to speak. And that became a selling point. I'll give you an example. Megan Telpner, she's a nutritionist and she was working in advertising and she got very sick on a trip to Africa and discovered that she had Crohn's disease and was determined to heal herself. She didn't like the solutions that were out there in the medical world. And so she started studying nutrition and was able to heal herself and bring herself into remission, I think for more than a decade, and started teaching other people what worked for her on her website, entrepreneurship.com. And it's a very personal website. She writes a blog. She's got pictures of herself and her husband and an adorable baby that she just had all over it. And it just feels like you're genuinely connecting with her. And I thought that's something that a big company can't do. She's just really putting herself out there with her whole health journey. And now she's started a business called the Academy of Culinary Nutrition, where she teaches other people in the health field how to do what she did so they can apply it to their clients or people who would like to learn it in more depth just personally. And I thought she's such a wonderful example of this, how one person can bring their unique vibe to a business and make it successful.
Yeah, that's a really powerful observation. And I think it gives people a lot of confidence because, like you mentioned earlier, where, sometimes you're like, okay, if I want to do something in the internet, I have to be Mark Zuckerberg. But in reality, like have you shown really a lot of examples in this book, if you're kind of staying true and authentic to yourself and you find those things that you may or may not be passionate about, but you're able to kind of monetize it, then you have an opportunity to kind of be successful, although that can be relative as well.
I think you're right, Gresham. I think most people who are entrepreneurs don't aspire to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. We admire people like him, and I think they are very inspirational, but I think a lot of people really do value their lifestyle, and they feel like, you know what, I don't necessarily need to be the richest person in the world to have a happy lifestyle. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to be upset if my refrigerator stops working and I have to hire somebody and pay them $200 to fix it. You don't want to be living at that level of scarcity, but there's a middle ground. And I wrote this book in part to encourage people to go after their dreams, even if they don't intend to build a business that dominates the world, because you can still have an impact. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the internet. You can reach people all over the world today and help them through your business. And we've never had a moment like this in history before. It's just incredibly empowering for people who want to have an impact in life.
Yeah, there's an incredible amount of opportunity. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity in separate, niches that people are able to find and able to kind of develop or solve a problem, so to speak, in that specific niche. Now, I know there's a lot of people that might be listening to this and they're thinking like $1 million, that's a very, 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 very high goal. What types of things would you say, or have you seen with those people that you interviewed that have made them successful and being able to kind of, take it a step at a time?
Well, I'll get into two areas with this, Gresham. First of all, they did pick areas where it's possible to scale a business in a one-person business or a partnership. And I looked at the census data and kind of sliced and diced it on my own. And from that, and also interviewing people, I came up with 6 categories where I think it's most possible to do this. So they are e-commerce, manufacturing, informational content creation. So for instance, creating webinars or self-publishing books or learning type programs. The 4th one is professional services and creative businesses. The 5th one is personal services. And the 6th one is real estate. So choosing a field where it's a little bit easier to scale in a one-person business can help you get a jump start. But the other thing these owners did was they made different use of their time than what I see in many freelance businesses. So for instance, they would focus heavily on the high value activities of growing a business, like strategy, for instance, or spending time with potential clients who could be really important to the business, and less time on minutia. We all tend to get caught up in little things like managing our email inbox and that sort of thing. But if you want to scale your revenue, whether it's to 6 figures for the first time or 1 million, you really need to clear the decks of all of those tedious little tasks that could best be done either by a computerized tool or by somebody else that you can outsource to. So they often the first step would be to automate. So they would use things like a scheduling app. I like this one called Schedule One. Some people use Calendly. Instead of just emailing back and forth to figure out what time their clients can meet with them, etc., they would just send a link. And that can easily save anybody who makes appointments 2 or 3 hours a week. When you think about all the time where your mind is interrupted by sending an email in the middle of the day and then you get back to a task. So they do things like that. The other thing I found helpful is they outsource. So for instance, the e-commerce stores, a lot of them will use a service like Fulfillment by Amazon instead of trying to pack the boxes themselves and deal with the warehousing and that sort of thing, because it's not something that you can do that easily as a one-person operation, but it's very easy for the Amazons of the world to handle very well for you. And I saw this in some niche industries too. So for instance, Harry Ines sells swag, which is those tote bags that have a company's name on them or mugs and things like that. And he used a specialized back office service for other swag sellers, interestingly enough, that does things like his invoicing, etc. And as his business has grown, he has used it more. So he's been able to grow to $3.5 to $4 million in revenue a year from his garage. He's a dad who likes to coach his son's sports teams and take him to swimming lessons. And he's got the freedom to do that while making that kind of money because he outsources. Another guy who did this was Christopher Cadigan, who runs Unishippers of Nassau County South in Oyster Bay, New York. And he was able to break the $1 million barrier as a one-man operation because he outsources his customer service, billing, and collections to a virtual management firm in Melbourne, Florida. So he can focus on the big picture. And he actually liked the service. It's called Right Growth Shipping so much that he eventually partnered in it. And now he helps other franchisees manage their businesses the same way. And I thought that example was so powerful, because you think of a franchise as being a business where you can't do things your own way, but he actually could. And so he was able to accomplish so much more than someone might in a franchise just by that simple decision to outsource. And yes, there is a cost to these things, but you also have to realize, as the CEO of your one-person business or partnership, your time is really valuable. And if you're not spending it on the right things, the business will not grow, and you'll always be sort of busy with busy work. So those are some of the things that I thought were very, very important. The other thing that I found to be important was using low-cost marketing tools. So for instance, Facebook advertising is really important these days, or other types of pay-per-click advertising. It gives you a huge reach. You can really target your marketing to a specific audience. And that's something that you just didn't have 10 or 15 years ago to grow a business. So mastering those types of things or outsourcing it to someone who has can also help your business grow. And there is some investment in it, but if you want to grow, you do have to invest in your business as you have the money available. And that doesn't necessarily mean in the first month or two. It means, as you have the cash flow to support it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think one of the things that kind of even resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening, is sometimes when you think of a one person, especially a $1 million business, you automatically think, well, that person must not sleep at all. But it sounds like the things that you talked about. Right. But I like the fact that you talked about, finding automation tools, finding other people you can maybe outsource things to. So it's not necessarily that person doing everything. It's that person understanding where their time is best well spent, and then finding out how to take the minutia off their plate so that they are able to kind of continue to grow.
It can be done gradually, I should add to what you're saying. I think that you can't do all these things overnight. So maybe you decide, okay, this week I'm going to add the scheduling app. Next week, I'm going to a mileage tracker to my phone so I don't have to write it down every time I get in the car and drive to a client. Or the week after that, I'm going to attach my QuickBooks or FreshBooks to my business bank account and to my business credit card so that those transactions get pulled in automatically. You can do it slowly and focus on the low-hanging fruit first. And the low-hanging fruit, if you're doing a startup or you're starting a business on the side and you don't have a lot of startup capital, do the free ones first. And then you concentrate on the lower cost ones, like the scheduling app maybe will cost you $60 a year, which isn't that much when you consider what your time is worth. And then as you get more revenue coming into the business and you can support it, maybe you invest in a CRM system, which might cost you more. Maybe it'll cost you $100 a month so you can build a mailing list for the business and reach your followers. You can't do it all overnight. I in my own business, I try to set a goal of one or two things like that every week. And maybe you get one of the two done, but at least you're ahead of where you would have been if you didn't even put them on your list. And you have to also focus on the ones that will move the needle the most for the business. So maybe for an e-commerce business, the number one thing you should be focusing on is learning how to do Facebook advertising or building your mailing list. Whereas for a professional services type of business, it might be something entirely different. You have to really think about the strategy of the business and what is the one thing you can do this week that will really move you forward towards your biggest goals.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I always think about anytime I hear that people think that an overnight success happens overnight, but really it takes years and years and years sometimes of doing things once. So, if all you have is a weekend is doing that one thing during the weekend just to kind of move the needle over a little bit more so that you're able to kind of reach whatever goal you might have.
It can take time, Gresham, but it's funny how there's sort of a momentum game to business. So I'll give you an example. Laszlo Nadler, who appears early in the book, runs a business called Tools for Wisdom. And he's a young dad. He's got 2 children and a wife. He's the main breadwinner. And he was working for a big bank as a project manager. And he loved certain aspects of his job, like time management and doing things more efficiently. but he wanted to be self-employed. So on the side, he started the business and built it over 2 years before he quit. And at a certain point, he hit 6-figure revenue and he really understood how to grow the business. The revenue really took a big leap. And now it's at $2 million in annual revenue. So I think if you take a little time to master the basics of the business, all of a sudden you can step on the gas pedal and be really impactful. And you'd be surprised. So it can be like a 10-year overnight success for some people. And it depends on the nature of the business. But there is a sort of return on the time that you put in early on. And I think the momentum tends to pick up usually after 1 or 2 years. So don't get discouraged if it's going slowly, because it can pick up very quickly once you really know what you're doing with that business.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think even like you said before, if you focus on the business, not just time spent too, it's probably time spent in the right places, because like you mentioned, the strategy and the high level things rather than organizing your emails. But if you're spending it in very pivotal places, it can help you kind of gain momentum fast. Is that correct?
That's true, Gresham. I think we all make rookie mistakes. I know in my business, the first year of my business, I wasted time with clients that were underpaying me greatly, paying me extremely late, not being respectful of my time. And I didn't really assert myself because I was so happy to have any business at all. And I think a lot of people are like that. You feel like, okay, my dance card is full, so that's good. And to some extent, it's true. There is sort of a critical mass of clients you need. But as I've grown my business, and I think a lot of people do this, you think, you know what, that's really not good for my cash flow to work with somebody who pays me 9 months later. I just can't run a business that way. And while that person might be nice and they might need my help, I just can't do it anymore. I have to focus on the clients where it's more of a reciprocal arrangement where we both treat each other really well. And I think you'll weed out some of those low value activities over time, because you'll start to realize how there are so many moving parts to a business. And if certain parts are not working, it affects other things. So if you're wasting time collecting from somebody over and over again, that's time you could be spending with a better client. And I think those are things that will dawn on you over time. And you shouldn't beat yourself up feeling like you failed if you made these mistakes, because the mistakes are part of learning too. In fact, one of the things I loved about the interview with Ben and Camille Arneberg was how they viewed the investment they put into their business as almost a college course. So they put in about $5,000 initially into inventory at Willow and Everett. And they said, this would be how much we would pay for a college course. So even if we lose all the money, we'll have learned so much from that. And you shouldn't do it with money you can't afford to lose. But if you do have a certain amount in your startup war chest, then you should look at it that way. And the same thing with your time. You might waste some time. And if you're not an efficiency expert the first year, well, nobody really is, but you can get better. We can all get better. And suddenly the learning will kick in. That's what I found with all of these entrepreneurs. They kept on learning and paying attention to the signals around them. And then all of a sudden they would figure things out and they could really double down on what was working.
That's interesting, especially that the idea of how they constantly kind of improved themselves and then got better. And as a result, their businesses got better as well. Now, have you seen, or what are some of the reasons that maybe you've heard of or know of that people that want and aspire to build similar businesses don't actually get the opportunity to do that?
Everybody has the opportunity to do it. It's more a matter of whether you have the will to do it right now. I mean, there are lots of people, I'm sure you know people that say, I want to start a business. I have a great idea, and they never get around to it. There are often reasons they don't get around to it. Maybe they deep down don't really care about it that much. Maybe they want to, but they care about other things more. They have other priorities right now. It doesn't mean they can never do it. It might mean they're really maxed out. For instance, if you have very small children and you're taking care of them, it can be hard to start a business at that time. I started my business when I had 3 children who were ages 4 and under, including a baby. And now I have 4 children. That wasn't ideal. I did it, but it was hard. I was very tired in the beginning. So some people might say, you know what? I value my sleep right now. I need to be fully awake during the day.
Right.
and I'm going to wait 2 years to start a business. I wouldn't beat yourself up if you're in that state of mind right now. Or you might feel like, you know what, we have a lot of family financial responsibilities. Maybe you have a child in college or something like that, and you have to pay a lot of bills right now. It might not be the right timing, but what you can do if you're serious about it is start learning. There are all kinds of great online courses out there now. There are great podcasts like yours. You can learn so much from learning from other entrepreneurs. You could start, maybe once a month, go to a meetup in your community for entrepreneurs, just to sort of keep in touch with other entrepreneurs and keep your interest alive. And then when the timing is right, go ahead and do it. Now, the other thing I hear about from people is startup cash is an obstacle, and it's an obstacle for everybody. Not that many people have the startup cash that they need. Probably the vast majority don't. But the good news is a lot of the types of businesses I've written about in the book really don't require much. There were a number of people that started with less than $1,000. I didn't really have any startup cash in my own business. I had a computer and I had a phone, and that was it basically. And then my startup cash was my own labor. So if you're in professional services, that's the case. You do need to have some savings or some other source of income. So if you're the main breadwinner and your family is depending on your income to pay the bills, I don't recommend just getting mad and quitting your job and having no other source of income, because it takes time to ramp up the revenue, and you don't want to start the business under terrible financial pressure or where you're severely inconveniencing your family, where they're worried about having groceries or having a roof over their head. That isn't really fair to the other people in your life if that's the role you've been playing. So you need to try to find a way to frugally, maybe do some side work, whatever it takes to get a little bit of savings in the bank. I would recommend no less than 2 months of living expenses, ideally a little more, before you leave a job and start a business. Because when you're in a do or die situation, some people thrive under it, but I think most people get really stressed and they'll wind up having to go back into a traditional job, which you don't want to do if this is the business you want to start.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And understanding, of course, like what your goals are and understanding what your realistic situation is and trying to make decisions based off of that. But like you mentioned, it doesn't sound like, okay, well, I can't start a business today, but that doesn't mean I can't build towards actually launching that business by going to meetups or listening to the podcast or taking this online course or all those different things that you can do to try to build yourself up to when that business actually launches. There's
so much you can do. And even if you can't really start the business now, just think about how much you would accomplish if you said every week, say it's, Saturday morning at 11 a.m., I'm going to spend 1 hour on something that will help me get closer to this business. You put it on your schedule. You picked a time when you have nothing else to do and you're going to stick with it. And maybe, 1 week you're going to learn about how to set up a CRM system, or 1 week you're going to put up a LinkedIn profile for the business. It's something you can just do in 1 hour. At the end of the year, you'll have put in 52 hours into that business, which can really have a big impact. A smart person, a focused person who puts forth 1 hour of effort can get a lot done. So don't discount small amounts of time. It doesn't take that long to do things. I know we put up a website for my business, a speaker website, and it took about 3 hours. That was it. So I think if you think about how easy it is to do things, you might feel less discouraged too, because a lot of the programs out there aimed at small business owners have just gotten better and better, and they're so user friendly and so easy that even if you're the least technical person there is, you can use them.
Yeah, I would definitely, echo that. And, going back to the conversation we were having about technology, like there's so many and so much information out there that you have at your fingertips to figure out how to do just about anything online that you don't necessarily have to say, oh, this is a insurmountable task that I can't reach. But it's something that if I do a little bit of homework, maybe I can figure out exactly how to do that website or create that podcast or whatever it is that you want to do.
Exactly. There's so many YouTube videos you can learn from, or lynda.com, or I wouldn't discount just calling the helpline sometimes at the programs that you use. I had a question about QuickBooks, and I was getting very frustrated watching a tutorial that was about a slightly different version of QuickBooks than I actually had. So I called the helpline. We resolved the problem in 2 minutes. And it was wonderful. It saved me hours of just trying to figure it out on my own. So try those phone numbers. Sometimes they have really good people on the other end, and that might be just what you need. And you may never have to revisit certain tasks too. Like what I did is something I have to do once a year. I probably, now that I know it, I'll never have to really go back over it again. So it's a little investment of time, but now I moved the business forward. I did what I had to do, and it's done.
Exactly. And that's something that you mentioned that you saw a lot in the people that had built those $1 million one person businesses, that they value their time. They were able to be extremely efficient in order to do that. For like people that are listening that might be freelancers, what other advice would you give or that you saw on building and taking that freelance business into that $1 million business or whatever it is their goal might be?
I think community is very important, Gresham. What I found with the businesses in this book was the folks who ran them were very generous in sharing information with other people. A lot of times I interview corporate CEOs, and it seems like they're trying to tell me as little as possible. And, they're very guarded. And that's because they're representing big corporations. But in these ultra lean businesses, they only had to answer to themselves. And I found they were very free in sharing information with each other and giving back to the community of other small business owners, and then in turn brought resources to them that they didn't expect. So other people would give them assists. And I would say, find some friendly competitors. I mean, I have this in my own field. There's other small business journalists. I cannot write every single article on small business entrepreneurship. I have a certain capacity. And so when I can't do things, I refer work out to other people, or I team up with other people. You can scale in that way too. Maybe you can't go after certain big projects because you don't have the capacity, but you could team up with another freelancer or a team of, say, a graphic designer and a writer and a tech person to go after a bigger job. And, it's very easy to set these things up. Sometimes the way I've done it, I have a second business with another freelancer. We just set up a business bank account for our bigger scalable projects and formed an LLC. And we were basically in business. You have to do it with someone you trust. If you don't know someone well, another way you could do it is just run it through your own business and you pay them as contractors. But there's so many ways to do it. It's a matter of realizing that a one-person business or partnership doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're all interdependent. We're all part of a community. And the more open you are, I think the more rewards there will be. I think sometimes people are afraid other people will steal their customers or steal their ideas. And the reality is, people are so busy doing their own thing. I think that's a rarity. It might happen once in a while, but chances are it won't. And you'll probably instead find yourself with a great ally to help you.
Exactly. It's this idea of this word that I heard before. I don't even know if it's a real word, but it's coopetition, where you're cooperating, but you're still kind of maybe in competition, but you're able to kind of work together to go after that larger opportunity that you may not have been able to kind of take care of yourself.
Co-opetition. I love that word. That's great. I haven't seen that before, but that's a perfect word for it. Because when you're small and scrappy, you can't do it all alone. I think the big corporations of the world can operate in a sort of kill or be killed mentality, but most of us we're not at that level, and we don't want to be. And it's so much more fun to feel like you're not alone, because I think, Gresham, one of the big enemies of the freelancer is the sort of loneliness and isolation you can have when you're having a bad day. A client has been mean to you or whatever, some things are going wrong. No one's paying you on time or whatever. Sometimes being able to call up another friendly freelancer and say, hey, are they not paying you on time either? And, take the pulse. It just makes you realize you're not alone. These things will pass. Your friends may talk you down from the ledge,
Right.
So keep on doing it another day. Because I don't want to misrepresent what running a small business is. It is hard. I've been in business for 10 years. It's not all sunlight. You know what I mean? There are times when you can have some dark times, or you could be scared. I started my business in the Great Recession, and I remember going to the bank, and I had some checks from clients that had come very, very late. And we're hearing news that the banks are about to collapse and that sort of thing. And I'm in line, and one of my friends calls me and says, Elaine, I'm thinking of taking my money out of the bank. What do you think? And then a family member calls me. I'm thinking of withdrawing all my money from the bank. And here I am ready to deposit these checks in my business bank account, saying, oh my goodness, I hope all this work I did isn't
Right.
And I just took a leap of faith and I put the money in the bank. But it was a scary time. I had small children. My husband worked in real estate. His business was affected by the Great Recession, just like a lot of people's careers were. And it was scary. And I thought, wow, I wonder if I would be safer in a corporate career. But I had made the commitment to do my own business. And I think we all have these moments of doubt and fear and isolation, and the world isn't supporting us, and it's hard to be a freelancer. And so having a community really makes a difference.
Awesome. Awesome. And what ways have you found to kind of find that community if there's those freelancers that are listening and have no idea where to begin?
Well, I would say going to events in your industry can be a good place to start. So I've gone to events run by Media Bistro because I'm part of the media. The Freelancers Union has them, although I have not personally attended those. There might be organizations that you can join for a small amount of money where then you can go to their meetings and kind of talk shop. I find I also just meet people just through chatting with them a little bit, sometimes on phone calls, like when I'm interviewing somebody for a story or I'm talking to one of my private clients. I get to know them a little bit better, and they might not be freelance writers, but they're also business owners. And maybe we'll go out for a cup of coffee here and there just to stay connected. And that becomes your community. Even your clients can be good advisors sometimes. I find a lot of my clients are smaller firms. I do a lot of work for big firms too, but the smaller ones, we become sort of symbiotic, helping each other. And I think if you let your guard down a little bit, you don't want to just dump all your problems on your clients. But,
Right.
if you say, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to do Facebook marketing, and I know you run a marketing firm. I would love to get your advice, and I'd be happy to barter some of my time to give you some extra time. Or, you make it useful to them. You'd be surprised at how your community builds, and even just supporting them on social media. Maybe you don't live in a place where it's easy to meet your clients, for instance, but if you see they're posting things on LinkedIn, share it with your network, help them get more exposure. And I think people just naturally want to help other people who help them. And even if people don't help you, keep helping them, because I think it just brings a good vibe into the overall environment and brings good things your way indirectly just by giving.
Yes, I definitely believe that givers gain. So definitely making sure to put out positive vibes in the universe, so to speak, and then it definitely comes back. Maybe if it's not even through that same person.
Definitely. I mean, the other way you can meet people is just getting out of your house. And I know that sounds funny to people who might be listening who work in a corporate job and they're tired of commuting. But when you work from home, if you do, or even if you work in a co-working space, you may not see that many people during the day. And I found just personally, I live near a YMCA that has really great classes. So I make myself go during the day sometimes. I just went to a bar class and I could exercise and do the same things at home, but I go in part to see other people and I meet interesting people there. And actually some of them are self-employed. And when I get to chatting with them, I find we have a lot in common and it's fun. And so it might not even be work related stuff. If you just do the things you enjoy and take time to talk to the other people who are doing them, you might find that you have business things in common too, or not, or volunteer work, or going to your house of worship. There's so many places you might come across other people that become supporters of what you're doing and needing to be rooted on in your business.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense. And I'm a big believer in vibrations and vibrating higher. And I think that just like you mentioned before, like whether it is a bad client or whether it is a volunteer opportunity that you're truly passionate about, those kind of emit vibes that can kind of direct, how successful you are, how happy you are, and how you're working, how you look at your work and all those things. But if you're not really paying attention to that, then sometimes things can kind of go off the rails.
Absolutely. I mean, the worst thing possible when things are not going right is to be alone at your computer stewing about it. Because chances are someone else will give you some perspective. One other interesting thing, since we're talking about vibrations, is I found a lot of the people in the book and just successful entrepreneurs in general do things like meditation or yoga or some sort of very physically demanding type of activity where they can't think about work. because it's so hard. And I highly recommend that. I think one of the things that separates these high revenue entrepreneurs from others is that they protect time to renew themselves and get distance from the business. And that might be by going to networking events where they get away for the weekend with other high caliber entrepreneurs, or it might just be doing some meditation. I have a wonderful coach, Doug Wick. He's my business coach from Gazelles, which is a global coaching organization. And he is a big meditator. And I have not been able to meditate successfully, but it's been so powerful for him that I've put it on my list for this year. I want to be able to meditate for at least 5 minutes at a time. And that must sound so pathetic to people that are real meditators. But my substitute is going to hot yoga because it's so hot in there and so hard to do that I cannot think about
anything else.
Class. And when I come back, what's really interesting is sometimes I go there and I'm stressed because I have like 20 things to do that day. I come back and I realize there's only one really high value thing I need to get done today and only today. And all of a sudden I have much more perspective and I'm working on more important things in the business than like the little, I have to get back to that person on an email when it could easily wait till tomorrow. And I think everybody should be finding that thing that doesn't let you think logically and just breaks you away from work so that you can come back to it with a brand new perspective. It could even be playing with your kids. Honestly, if you play with little kids and you really focus on being present with them, that can be a form of meditation too. For the folks out there who have a lot of personal demands on their time, it doesn't have to be an obstacle. It can actually be exactly what you need.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. It's funny that you say that because sometimes whether I'm walking my dog or I'm going to the gym, it's like that escape away from, the day to day sometimes brings me clarity when I go back to do, whatever it is that I have to do. So it's those escapes where it sounds counterintuitive that you are not working in order to maybe be more efficient at work. Although that's not the goal, sometimes it's that escape that just kind of gives you that clarity or peace.
I think you're right about that. And it's funny that you said walking your dog helps you with that, because I think dogs are like children in some way.
Yes, they are.
They don't stop paying attention. They want your attention. And whatever it is in your life that gives you that distance and clarity is important. And just figuring out what that is can be fun. Because I found that although I didn't find that a lot of the folks in the book were literally working the 4-hour work week, which I
right.
aspire to. It's a great goal to set, and hopefully we'll all get there. But they didn't work 90 hours a week either. And they really valued their personal time. And I think working yourself to death is not going to get you to $1 million. There's sometimes seasons of imbalance in a one-person business. Maybe you have a couple of overlapping projects for really important clients, and this is your busiest week of the year, or you're an e-commerce store and it's the week before Christmas and you've got to go flat out and just get it done. I mean, that's okay. You shouldn't beat yourself up for it. It's just reality. But you don't want to be working like that every single day. And if you are, that means you need some sort of a team, virtual assistants or an outsourced service or something that can free you up so you're not just completely buried in the weeds.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, awesome, Elaine. I truly appreciate you. Gave us so much great information and content on how we can kind of build our businesses. What I wanted to do was just kind of give you the floor to see if there's anything else additional you wanted to tell our readers and our listeners. And then lastly, how people can best get in touch with you and also get a copy of your book.
Thank you so much, Gresham. You are a great interviewer. You ask such good questions, and I can tell you're in business for yourself because you got to the heart of things that really interest small business owners. So I appreciate the time you put into preparation and asking fantastic questions. What I would say to your readers is I welcome hearing from you. I thrive on hearing other small business owners' stories, and I write for a number of different publications. I would love to hear from you about how your business is growing. I want to know what your concerns are, what your story is, what your goals are, because that helps me be a better small business journalist and author. And it gives me ideas that I can explore that I think will help other people run their businesses better. That's my mission as a small business journalist, is to help other small business owners reach their life's biggest goals. For folks who would like to get in touch with me, I'm going to give you my website. It's the $1,000,000onepersonbusiness.com. The is part of the name, and everything is spelled out. Or you could go to ElainePofeldt.com. I'll spell it phonetically, but you'll probably have to check it on Gresham's website because it's kind of a mouthful. It's P as in Peter, O, F as in Frank, E, L as in Larry, D as in David, T as in Tom.com. So ElainePofeldt.com. And for those who would like to buy the book, you can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, get it at Barnes & Noble stores, and pretty much anywhere at a major bookseller. I really welcome your feedback on the book if you read it. I love to hear from readers, so please feel free to contact me if you've read it or post an Amazon review.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Elaine. And we're going to have those links into the show notes. So just in case anybody wants to go and click through, you can find it. You can find those links in the show notes. But thank you again, Elaine. Loads of great information. I truly appreciate this book. I love this book. And I just hope you have a great rest of the day.
Oh, thank you, Gresham. You too. Have a great day.